Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are here to break down not just what happened on trade deadline day. Obviously, we're a week removed. I was on vacation, so
must have been nice.
It was nice, and watching the trade deadline happen from Florida, and going to a couple Leafs games in Florida down there.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
Great results. Great results. Except for when the Leafs scored to go ahead 4-3 against the Panthers. A guy behind us, also a Leafs fan, was very excited, jumped out of his seat, and actually went flying over top
Really?
of our seat, hit my dad. He spilled his wine, and the guy fell. Luckily, there was an empty chair right next to him. So
wait, let's rewind though really quick and talk about. You said spill the wine.
Spilled the wine. My dad got wine at a hockey game. Yeah,
I just want to clarify.
Yes.
Okay.
This guy, he of course spills his wine. He's like down on the ground and was like, "Oh man, sorry, I don't know what happened. I don't know how this happened." Obviously inebriated,
right?
And I think he was with his mom.
Wait, how old was this guy?
Probably he was like older than us. Probably like had to have been late 30s, something like that. And he goes, "Oh man, sorry. Did I make you spill your wine?" My dad says, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, sorry, bro."
No,
doesn't ask like, "Hey, can I get you another drink?" Like,
yeah, I know they cost $20 for a glass of wine. But
can I toss you some money?
Can I give you a tenner or something? And
nothing. And then his mom leans over and was like, "Did you lose any of your wine?" My dad goes, "Yeah, most of it." And she's like, "Oh, sorry there, eh?"
Sorry there, eh?
Just because you say sorry, and you say sorry, not sorry, that doesn't mean you're polite. It means you're an asshole when you spill someone's drink like that. But at least it was our team that was scoring the goal. So
I guess if there's any caveat to that,
there was that. It was fun. So we were 2-0 on our trip.
Congratulations.
Yeah. We missed the trade deadline, but actually it's a good thing because we have some games under our belt. We've seen some of these guys end up in the lineups where they're at, and that kind of gives us a little bit more of an idea of what these teams are going to look like moving forward. So we're just going to run through these trades, and we'll take a look at maybe what the impact has been so far and how we expect their impact to be the rest of the year. So let's start a couple days before the deadline. Andre Kasha has now, he's had a little bit of time to acclimate himself. By that I mean he's played one game for the Bruins so far. But the deal itself, Kasha for, of course, Backus, Axel Anderson, and a first-round pick. Your thoughts on Anaheim giving up on Kasha?
Well, we knew coming into the deadline that Anaheim was willing to take some money back, right? And of course, by doing so, they're, of course, going to obtain a better return than maybe they would if they just did a straight-up player for a pick or whatever have you. And let's be honest, too. They didn't take all of Backus' salary. I think they left 25% with Boston. But still, Boston has to move salary out to get a guy like Kasha. And even though his salary is only $2.6 million, but I think Alex Anderson, he's a good prospect. I think there is some potential there. But you got to think, too, for Boston, right? That first-round pick they gave up, you're looking at, a mid-late-ish, maybe 20. You would assume they're probably going to go a little deep in the playoff, at least to the second round, maybe first round, depending on who they got to play. I don't know. But so you got to think you're looking at a 20-ish pick. So, in a deep talent, in a deep pool in the draft, I think you can still get a quality player there at number 20. And
let's not forget, Akasha's best season was a 38-point season in 2017-18. He did only play 66 games that year. Last year, he only played 30 games. He had 20 points. This year, he's got 23 points in 50 games.
Yeah, I do love his game, though. He is a great two-way player, and when he's healthy, he's very, very effective. Even on a terrible Ducks team, he was pretty good when he was healthy. But the problem is staying healthy, right? So if you're Boston, you hope that he can play a full maybe 70, 75 plus game season, and so they got one more year left with him, which is great on his deal.
And then he's an RFA too,
right? So. And so he's still hanging around there, but. For Boston, it gives them a little depth. Right now, they don't have to have Charlie Coyle up on that second line. They can throw him down on the third line, let him center that, or vice versa. They can move Kasha down, Coyle up. So you don't have to stack your top two lines. Now you get a little bit of breathing room with your third line.
Right. Yeah, and a $2.6 million cap hit for a team that's generally up against it. He's some cost control involved with him.
Yep.
We saw a few cost control moves where maybe more was given up for a guy. Like, personally, and let's give full props to Anaheim. They drafted Andre Kasha in 2014, 205th overall in the 7th round.
Wow.
And they just flipped him now for basically a guy who's at least at this point in his career, he's been essentially a 40-point guy. Maybe his high end's 50 points.
Okay.
But I don't think he's much. He's not much more than that.
Right. He's never going to be a top line guy.
No. So you and with the first round pick, no matter where you're picking in the first round, you do have an upside, like a chance to draft somebody who could be even a franchise player. I mean, Ryan Getzlaf went 26th overall or 24th, something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, with a deep
you have a
pool
chance
of talented guys coming in to the draft, you can snag a pretty decent player in the first round there.
Yep, absolutely. Well, okay, let's move on to Vegas giving up Cody Eakin for what essentially is a fourth round pick.
Yeah, there are conditions to this pick, right? So it's a 2021 fourth round conditional pick, and the condition is it upgrades to a 21 third round pick if Winnipeg makes the playoffs or re-signs Cody Eakin before July 5th. So no and in there, it's just one or the other.
Yep.
Winnipeg, we know right now, sitting on the bubble. They're fighting Nashville and Calgary for those wild card spots. So initially when I saw this trade, I thought, okay, cool, it's a nice little depth move because don't get me wrong, I think Winnipeg, obviously they have Mark Scheifele at center, but beyond that, their depth in the center position isn't really that great.
No, and I mean that has been their issue is that they trade for Paul Stastny Jets. No pun intended. Actually, no pun intended. Then they trade for Kevin Hayes, and he leaves for Philadelphia. And so now they just didn't want to give up that higher pick to bring in the guy. There really wasn't a center available like that they could have gotten. So instead, you trade for a guy like Cody Eakin, who is a third line center, as opposed to maybe getting a guy who could play in the top six, like a Kevin Hayes, like a Paul Stastny. But you're playing them down in the lineup. Yeah, I mean, I like the move for. It's really a no risk for Winnipeg, and essentially we found out later it was a way for Vegas to clear some cap. And Cody Eakin does have a pretty high cap hit for what he is, $3.85 million for a guy whose best year is a 41-point year last year.
He's a third line center, in my opinion. That's what he is.
And he only has 10 points through this year, just not having a really great year. So I think good move all around. I guess the one downside is he's not a UFA at the end of the year.
He'll be a UFA.
Okay, he is. Yeah.
Which, I mean, again, when you're giving up a fourth round pick for a guy that's probably, again, no pun intended, going to jet this summer.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's a low risk, high reward kind of move because again they needed help at the center position and now you don't have to have Blake Wheeler play your second line center. They right now they have Cody Eakin slotted in there between Line A and Ehlers. How long that's going to last, I have no idea.
Yep.
But we'll see it again. But it gives Winnipeg the option to now put that top line that was so dangerous the last couple of seasons back together. Kyle Connor, of course, he's already another 30-goal season. Blake Wheeler, we know what he can do. He can give you 70 assists every single year. He's phenomenal. So we'll see what they do now.
All right. Kovalchuk goes to the Capitals. This one really flew under the radar. Even when watching all the coverage on deadline day, there wasn't a whole lot of chatter about Kovalchuk going to Washington. And I actually remember on our previews, like predictions for things, I said it would be great if he could go here. There's so many Russians on this team. Of course, Ovechkin's like the leader of all the Russians throughout the National Hockey League anyways. Right. Like I see it, like if there's one guy who the Russians are pointing to, it's oh my gosh, Ovechkin.
Yeah.
And so I love the move. It kind of brings these two guys who both Kovalchuk obviously a little bit older, but kind of came in same generation, and have teared up the league. It'll be interesting to see if Kovalchuk can continue the pace that he was doing with Montreal. Like, he played very well with Montreal. I mean, kudos to Montreal, who's they gave up a fifth-round pick for Marco Scandella, flipped him for a second-round pick,
right,
and then signed Kovalchuk for nothing, $700,000, but he only played 22 games for them. So in reality, they paid him like $150,000, and they get a third-round pick for him. So thus far,
good asset management.
Thus far, not a great start for Kovalchuk. In 2 games, he's got no points, and he's a -3, but I guess we'll be willing to give him more than 2 games to feel it out.
And I think this is more of a playoff move because, let's face it, he's not going to get those top 6 minutes that he was getting in Montreal.
Sure. And that's definitely helpful. And
and don't get me wrong, I think he's the type of guy, too, for those who don't know, he loves to set up like Ovi at the top of the circle and just whale that slap shot, right? So power play time-wise, he's not going to get a ton of it either because Ovi can hang out there for a minute and a half, minute 45 all day long and just rip it at the top of the circle. So, he'll get 20, 15 seconds of power play time at best. And he'll be more, in my opinion, I think he's going to be a guy come playoff time where the teams, if they're struggling, their top 6, having Lars Eller, Carl Hagelin, Kovalchuk on that third line, that could pay off very well for these Capitals here.
All right. Let's go to a trade with your Detroit Red Wings. Mike Green, as we predicted, gets dealt, and he gets sent to the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, the Ken Holland connection is strong, as we saw them make another move later on in the day for another Red Wings player. Kyle Brodsniak and a 4th-round pick could become a 3rd if Green plays 50% of the games and they advance to the conference finals. And Detroit retains 50% of his salary, which doesn't really matter because he's a UFA, and so
sure.
It's just for Edmonton's cap purposes. I would love to hear your thoughts on.
Honestly, I'm totally fine with this because Mike Green's had some health issues. He hasn't been that same 30, 40 point offensive threat that he was when he signed with Detroit. But given his health, given his production as of lately, the fact that they were able to get a 4th-round pick and it could potentially be a 3rd-round pick, it's not bad, honestly. I mean, let's be honest. Mike Green's going to play a 5-6 role on Edmonton's defense and play second power play unit, but he gives them the ability if he can turn it around. And, now he's got a lot more talent. I don't want to say a lot more talented players, but he's got McDavid and Draisaitl.
And he wanted out.
Yeah, and he wanted out.
That's mentally, he's probably in a more tough place when you want to leave. Let's be honest here. Let's pull back and look at what this Red Wings team is doing right now.
I don't want to look.
They are one of the worst teams of the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
They are horrible. Right now, they have won 12 games in regulation or overtime. The Atlanta Thrashers, in their first year in the NHL, won 14 games in regulation or overtime. Now, there was no shootout. So, obviously, that's where 3 of Detroit's wins have come in the shootout. So, we're going to we'll leave those to the side. Even if we say that that's like 3 of those games was a tie, it's a pretty bad. 12 games.
The one number that looks really bad to me is
18 games left.
Yeah, the one number that looks really bad is the goal differential, right? You look at 120 essentially, in the negative, and the next worst team is San Jose, and I think they're only
46.
It's not even close.
Actually, the next worst is Ottawa, 47.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're just miles beyond everybody else. It's pretty bad. I think the worst goal differential was Washington in their little 4-win season.
Yeah.
And it was like 300 or 200 and something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was pretty bad. But for Detroit to get something back, I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't, get rid of a lot more UFAs. But hopefully for Green now, his mentality turned around. He's going to go to a place where he knows he's going to compete for a Stanley Cup. He gets to play, like I said, with McDavid and Draisaitl in front of him. So now he's got better guys to dish the puck to, and hopefully that'll turn into a little bit better production, and then again gives Edmonton some better options on the back end, which has really been their Achilles heel for a long time.
All right. Mike Green, great, nice little easy pickup there for the Oilers. Nemesnikov goes to the Colorado Avalanche for a 4th round pick. Nemesnikov has really fallen from grace. Like, if you remember, just in 2017-18, he's on the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's 20 goals in 62 games, 44 points, and pretty earlier on in that year, he was playing on the top line. He was actually playing with Kucherov and Stamkos as their left winger, kind of that like net front presence, going to the corners kind of guy. And he was the perfect fit. It was the perfect line for him. They trade him to the Rangers. That was when they acquired Ryan McDonough. And he goes to the Rangers. He ends up with 2 goals in 19 games, only 4 points. And the following year, last year he has 31 points. Goes to Ottawa. He's got 25 points in 54 games. But man, he is almost like a different player. Like, nobody's putting him around other talented guys, and I think that he maybe is one of those guys that needs to be around some line drivers. Like, he's not a guy who's going to drive a line, but he's a really nice complementary piece, and I don't know why nobody's figured out how to use him, because Tampa was using him just fine. Now, of course, you go to a Rangers team that's rebuilding, and he was on their top line, but there wasn't really much chemistry there, which wasn't really happening for him. So far in Colorado, through 2 games, he's got an assist. But I think if he's used properly in Colorado, that this deal is actually could become one of the most significant deals of this day.
Well, I will say, given their injury, the injury bug that's going around Colorado, they just, I don't know how long Ratnan's going to be out, and with Kadri, I don't know when he's coming back either, if he even has, but. So given their injuries that are going around, I think this is a great depth piece that gives you a little bit more flexibility to have a guy who has proven he can do 30, 40 points, and so if you can move him into your top 9 somehow, and it gives you a couple more options, and you can give other guys a little bit more of a look. And then if worst case scenario, now you just throw them up, maybe with Andrei Burakovsky, and maybe you try to get that little Russian connection going and see if they can't help jumpstart it. But
I like it. Okay, so one of the biggest deals of the day, Jean-Gabriel Pageau goes to the New York Islanders. Already seeing just a big impact from him in his first game as an Islander, where, unfortunately, he kind of threw a suicide pass down the middle and and got his guy exploded, and he goes and gets in a fight, ends up his first game. He's got a goal and 17 penalty minutes, I think is what it was, when all was said and done. But through 2 games, he's got a couple goals, and he has fit in beautifully. Maybe the best fit thus far out of any deal made on deadline day.
Yeah, he's right now he's slotted in as a 3rd-line center, although I don't think that's where ultimately he's going to spend most of his time anyways. But with that said, I think this guy he fits their system very, very well because he plays a great 2-way game. He's an excellent centerman. He knows how to take draws. He's got speed. He's got all the tools I think Barry Trotz would want for somebody in his system, and that's why they were so quick too to hand him out that extension for $5 million per.
Yeah, for the next 6 years.
6 years,
a 6-year deal. They give up a first-round pick, which it's conditional on the Islanders selecting if they select in the top 3, they win the draft lottery, so that's not going to happen. So
right.
They get this year's first-round pick, a second-round pick this year, and then if they win the Stanley Cup this year, then they get a 2022 third-round pick. So it's a first and a second-round pick, which, in my mind, the Islanders, could they win? They could win another round. This pick could be. They could lose in the first round just as easily as they could win, I think. I think they're very much a team that, going in, other than the fact that Barry Trotz is their coach, and we know that Barry Trotz can pull some things out of his butt with a team that maybe is a lesser talented team, he has the horses. Like, Lou Lamoriello has done a very good job at going, this is my coach. These are the guys that he's going to need to have this system work. and he has given him those guys. Like, they went and they signed even like simple Leo Komarov, and they kept Jordan Eberle around because he was such a good fit with Barry Trotz there. They bring in Derek Brassard, who he hasn't been the worst acquisition for the Islanders.
No, and at $1.2
29
million
points in 61 games at 2 point, exactly. So they've been able to bring in the right guys for his system, and even Semyon Varlamov. We talked, when they signed him in the summer and they chose to let Robin Leonard go. We weren't sure how Varlamov would play in the system, and he's done beautifully. It really hasn't missed a step.
Yeah, my one concern, though, and especially with this deal and how quick they were to hand out an extension, is they have a lot of guys here that have a lot of money. They're a little bit, I don't want to say older, because they're all 28, 29, most of these guys.
Late 20s for the most part.
So they got guys that have term signed to these extensions, right? And you still got to pay Barzal, who, in my opinion, is going to garner over $9 million a season.
As a center, a guy who,
number one center.
But the difference is, he had a phenomenal rookie season.
Absolutely.
Behind John Tavares. He comes in, he's the top center. He puts up 62 points and 18 goals. Now he's got 18 goals in 63 games. He'll eclipse his 62-point total last year with 19 games left to go. My guess is he ends up somewhere in the 65 to 70-point range.
Yeah.
Which is probably good for, I think, more like $7.5-8 million. It's probably where he ends up.
I put him closer to 9 personally. When you look at what Kevin Hayes got and what he's doing, that's going to be a real big comparable. And Barzal's going to say, hey, if this guy gets $7 million and look what I'm doing, I'm your number one, the price is going to go up a little bit there. But with that said, for a team that struggles to score goals, right? J.G. Pageau, to me, isn't the answer in terms of goal scoring. He's going to provide some great two-way hockey, and he's going to help a little bit with that depth scoring on your third line. But, if they get into struggles, again, scoring-wise, they don't have any wiggle room to really get themselves out of that crunch.
Right.
Which is going to be a concern. And, again, let's talk about the other deal that almost happened, too, and that was Andrew Ladd going to Minnesota for Zach Parise. Right? That one was, they both waived their clauses to move. The deal almost happened. So I think this is something they could revisit in the summer. And again, while I don't maybe necessarily think that improves the goal scoring a ton, it would definitely be a better acquisition than having Ladd eat up cap space. But
yeah.
So we'll see.
Someone has to eat up cap space. It might as well be Parise.
Absolutely.
Okay. Probably the most unexpected deal of the day. Vinny Trocheck getting dealt to the Carolina Hurricanes for Eric Haula, Lucas Wallmark, Chase Prisky, and Edu Luisterainen. Okay, there we go. I tried.
Better than I would have said.
This trade kind of came out of nowhere. Florida Panthers battling with the Maple Leafs for that bottom spot in the Atlantic Division, and they give up their second-line center for Eric Haula, who is at best a second-line winger at his best, and Lucas Wallmark, probably like a borderline AHL fourth line.
Yeah, he's going to provide some depth at in their minor league system, but they did get a couple nice prospects, I will say. These guys are supposed to be potential, NHL talent, but again, I just don't know the thinking behind Florida's rationale to give up on a guy like Trocheck, right? I mean, granted, he did have 30 goals, 40, maybe it was 40 goals.
Two seasons
ago.
From a 31-goal season, and 75 points, too.
Yeah, and he's never been one of those guys that stays healthy for an entire season, right? He's, last couple of years he's been dealing with the injury bug.
Just the last 2 years. I mean, 2 years before that, 16-17 and 17-18, he played all 82 games. And the year before that, he played 76.
Right, but maybe Florida's concerned, right, with the injury and saying, hey, we want a guy who can stay healthy. Again, I don't know. You got a guy who has the potential. I still think he can be a 25, 30 goal scorer, and you're only paying him $4.7 million. Like, that's a steal.
Yeah.
And so you're dumping that cap money. You're giving Carolina gold, right? And one thing I've always said is if Carolina's interested in your guy, keep him. There's a good reason for it.
That's...
And so Eric Haula right now, Florida has him centered on that second line. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. But man, I don't know if maybe they're trying to set themselves up because they need to move some money somewhere so they can maybe re-sign Hoffman in the offseason. Maybe that's their goal.
That could be true.
But
this is, you're trying to make the playoffs,
right?
And they just, to me, what are you thinking as a Panther when this deal goes through?
You're saying now we've got to rely on Barkov and Huberdeau to do everything.
And you're saying we don't really, either we don't care if we make the playoffs this year, or we're pretty sure that we're not going to. So they didn't believe in this team with Trocheck. How do they feel about this team without him?
Yeah, I mean, Eric Hall has had one really good season, but outside of that, he's been a 25, 30-point guy. Right. And I think that's what he is.
Is it fair to say that they're talentless?
Wow. I'm just
Dale Talon's is their GM.
Yeah, nope, got it. I got it.
I know. There was just someone listening that was like, what the f is he talking about? Okay, let's Nate Thompson goes to the Flyers for a 5th-round pick. That's fine. It's a nice little depth move. Leafs get Callie Rosen for Michael Hutchinson. Rosen goes back to the Leafs. Hutchinson to the Avs. Hutchinson might play. Who knows? A little
probably
depth move
not
because
Grubauer's out right now,
hurt,
but he'll be back.
Rosen's already played a game for the Leafs, so
there you go. There's already a win.
I love this one. Patrick Marleau goes to the Pittsburgh Penguins, the team that Patrick Marleau as a child was a big fan of. Pretty cool for a 3rd-round pick. If the Penguins win the Cup this year, which is entirely possible,
absolutely,
it becomes a 2nd-round pick. So, I mean, the Sharks, I think they made out with this deal. Patrick Marleau, a guy that they signed, 10, 15 games into the year for a league minimum, and they get minimum 3rd-round pick. This could become a 2nd-round pick for them. Considering let's go to another trade that happened really shortly after. The Sabres get Wayne Simmons for a 5th-round pick that maybe becomes a 4th-round pick. If it meets several, just way too many conditions. There's no way. First off, why the frick did the Sabres trade for Wayne Simmons? Second off, this condition, if Simmons plays 10 regular season games, okay, well, that'll probably happen.
Sure.
The Buffalo Sabres qualify for the 2020 playoffs.
Probably not.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I would be willing to put $50,000 in the fact that they won't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the Rangers have a better chance at this point.
They're 10 points out of the playoffs.
Yeah. I think that is a move where I think they're thinking longer term. They're going to convince him to sign a low salary deal and stay there maybe for a few more years afterwards. But
yeah. Okay, so back to a 3rd-round pick for Patrick Marleau, a guy who
this is a win-win for both teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Great depth. Patrick Marleau can skate.
Still got the wheels, too, which is great. And I mean, Pittsburgh's been the most ravished team of injury this whole entire season, right? They've lost more man games than anybody else.
And not just like, oh, hey, we've had a bunch of 3rd and 4th line guys out.
Right.
I mean, Crosby's missed time. Malkin's missed significant time. Crosby had major surgery mid-season, right? It's just been a rough year for the Pittsburgh Penguins, yet they actually barely hanging on to that spot in the Metro right now, as Philadelphia has kind of come out of nowhere, and they're 8-2 in their last 10, won 5 in a row. But actually, I think they play each other here pretty soon.
That'd be fantastic.
Also, it doesn't help that Pittsburgh has lost to L.A. and Anaheim in back-to-back games.
Yeah, that was
in regulation.
But I don't actually, when I look at this Patrick Marleau deal, I don't even think this is mainly for regular season purposes because Pittsburgh's getting in. I think this is a depth move for the playoffs because when things start tightening up a little bit more, right, and your top lines are getting shut down, that's when you need that 3rd line to step up. And I think Marleau, with the experience and the presence he has, he's going to be that guy that can step in and motivate these bottom 6 guys to go out there and push it a little bit harder. And you'll see the value, the return come playoff time for a guy like Marleau.
All right. Let's just roll up here a little bit. Danton Heinen goes to the Anaheim Ducks for Nick Ritchie, defenseman for a forward here, going to the Boston Bruins.
Forward for forward.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Heinen is a forward.
Yeah. I like this move because I think Ritchie is a guy who, to me, he's one of those guys that I look at and I say, I've expected more out of his whole entire career, right? I think when he came into Anaheim, he was expected to be like the next big power forward behind Getzlaf on that team. But I still think he's got a little bit more in the tank. And I think he adds a little bit more grit because Boston's, I don't want to say they've gotten softer, but I don't think they're as tough to play against as maybe they once were, especially when you look back in, 2011 when they won, how just...
Well, sure. Times were a little different then, too.
But I think this will be a little bit more grit in their bottom six and a guy who can still, skate pretty decently, still can, put up a few points. So,
yeah, I think Heinen's a better player.
Yeah, I do too.
And numbers-wise, that point stands up. Of course, Nick Ritchie has less of a lower salary.
Yeah, and that might have been part of it too.
That could be part of it. But they also, let's lump this into the greater trade of, Andre Kasha also going to Boston. So we could just lump all those things in together. And to me, the Bruins basically acquire a guy who's slightly better than Heinen, but they also acquire a guy who's not as good in Nick Ritchie. I'm sorry, Kasha.
Right.
Let me start. Kasha. That they acquire Kasha, who's better than Heinen, but Heinen is better than Nick Ritchie.
Right.
In the end. So, yeah, you're going for maybe the types of player, but ultimately I really like this move for Anaheim. And it already is paying some dividends. He's played well thus far. I actually think Anaheim's won both games that he's played in. He's got a goal and an assist in his first 2 games.
All right.
So getting some more responsibility, too, with Anaheim, and I think that this trade will work out real well for Danton Heinen and Nick Ritchie. I truly think that he's I won't say a bust.
No, I mean, he's got 2 points through 2 games, which isn't bad, but...
I mean, in his career as a whole.
Oh, yeah.
As a 10th overall pick, a guy who's put up,
30 points seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a third-line winger. That's what he is. But I think this move, we're in a copycat league, right? And I think the last 2 seasons, you look at Washington and St. Louis winning the Cup, they brought grit, right? They weren't all speed. They weren't all finesse. And so I think this move has a lot to do with it, where Boston looks at it and says, okay, if we've got to go up against Washington, if we make it to the finals again and got to play St. Louis, who just manhandled us a lot of games, this guy's going to help us out. He's going to help us out in that area because I think, Boston, they tried to, bring David Backes over for that purpose and it didn't work out. So, Ritchie to me still has the potential to be a better point guy than Backes was during his tenure
Backes,
there. So,
that's fair. It's tough to get worse than David Backes.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. Okay, so let's go back to your Detroit Red Wings.
Thank you.
And the Red Wings get Sam Gagner and 2 second-round picks from the Edmonton Oilers in 2020 and 2021 for Andreas Athanasiou and Ryan Kuffner. Don't know anything about Ryan Kuffner.
Nope.
But this move, I think, was a much better haul than what they got for Mike Green from the Oilers.
Absolutely.
And your thoughts on what you guys were able to get back for Athanasiou.
2 second-round picks was great for a guy who, let's face it, Athanasiou can be a 30-goal scorer.
You hate saying his name right.
I love saying his name right.
Athanasiou. No, it's Athanasiou. Look at Athanasiou.
Stop.
Athanasiou.
Who was it? I think it was...
There's no ants in his name.
Ken Daniels. He's like, you got to pronounce it as, and nice to see you, is how to...
And nice to see you.
But anyways, 2 second-round picks for a guy who once was a 30-goal scorer. And obviously, he hasn't had anybody centering him. I don't think he's a line driver, but the speed is there. The hands are there. We know he's got the potential to be that kind of guy. And
now he can score 5-on-5.
Yeah,
when he's put in the right situation, we know he led the league in 5-on-5 goals, or was top 5.
Right, he was top 5. Yeah, and so now you put him with a guy like Connor McDavid, where you have 2 of the fastest guys in the league now get to play with each other. That's a win-win for Edmonton. You're going to finally give a guy who can play on the wing with McDavid and keep up. And I think if Cassian comes back healthy and ready to go, that could be a very dangerous line for them. And now you get the better part of that is now you have the option to put Draisaitl on that second line with Nugent Hopkins and Yamamoto when he comes back healthy, because that line was tearing it up while McDavid was out, dealing with injuries. So
Yep.
I think now you get more options, and then if worst case scenario you start to struggle a little bit in the playoffs, you put Draisaitl up with McDavid, and then guess what? Nugent Hopkins, still a very capable number 2 center, now gets to play with Anthony Ciu, and I think that's still a good landing spot for him anyways. And I think his potential, again, there's still a good ceiling for him, and to get 2 second-round picks for a guy who really just wasn't working out in Detroit and everybody knew needed to go somewhere else,
yeah.
I think that's a good return.
Especially considering that they drafted him in the 4th round in 2012. 110th overall, they'll get a chance to draft 2 players likely in the top 50. Right. When all is said and done in both those years.
And again, a deep draft this year, so that second-round pick will probably be a pretty decent acquisition.
Yep. The Oilers also get Tyler Ennis from the Ottawa Senators, and so that was a nice little depth move for the Oilers. I really think, I don't know about you, but in terms of the Oilers in the playoffs, I think that they've kind of cemented themselves into the playoff picture. Do we? I mean, of course, they could still easily miss the playoffs, but I just don't. I don't see really the one team that's chasing them would be the
Calgary
for like a wild card position would be Winnipeg, which Edmonton's going to have to fall 3 spots to miss the playoffs. I think they're in good shape.
Yeah, I would think so too. Now that you've got both McDavid and Draisaitl healthy for the stretch here, I think these guys will ramp it up a little bit, and they'll be all right.
I do think as we did talk about a couple weeks ago, Nashville wasn't going to just lay over and die, and Nashville has really turned it on. 6-3 in their last 10, and
looking real good.
They've won 3 games in a row. Yeah, they look much better. But you know who else does? The Minnesota Wild.
That's
All
true.
of a sudden, the Minnesota Wild are 1 point out of a playoff spot. They've overtaken Arizona, and I mean they've got 2 games in hand on Winnipeg. They should be able to jump them. And my goodness, if
it'll be a battle.
Minnesota
down the stretch.
Makes the playoffs somehow, it would be pretty crazy.
You could give Boudreau, or you could. Who was there in there? Not Boudreau.
Yeah, they fired Boudreau. But.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't remember his name. You could give him the Jack Adams nomination right there.
Just for the 30 games that he's their coach. It's Dean Evison.
Okay. Yeah, I will say, though, in terms of the Ennis move, right now he's playing up on a line with McDavid, and he's got 2 points through 2 games. But, again, Ennis is another guy with speed, right? He's got wheels on him. And so now you've got, again, options, which is what Edmonton really needed on the wing were options, right? So now you can put Ennis on your third line because he did have some decent production in Ottawa. So now you can have a better third line, or you can move him up if injuries happen like they have, and now you got a guy who's capable of skating with Connor McDavid, and you don't have to break up your first and second lines now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like quietly, Tyler Ennis is having his best season since like his second year in the league. I mean, he had 49 points. When he first came into the league, it was kind of more like this guy is going to be a top 6 forward. He's super fast. Had a lot of skill. He had 49 points in 82 games in his first year in the league, 34 and 48 in the lockout year. And then he had some injuries, and really after he got hurt in 2012, 2013, he was just never the same. And that season with Toronto that he signed last year, I think really kind of brought him back to the forefront. He really turned his game around. He goes to Ottawa. 33 points in 61 games so far this year for him in Ottawa, and I think coming to Edmonton, man, he might. I know they have what 18 games left or whatever, or 17 games
somewhere around there.
If he plays up with McDavid, if he's playing up in the lineup, there's a chance that he could still end up with like 14 more points over the next 17, 18 games. You might have a career high here.
There you go.
And you might have what could be maybe the steal of this day is getting a guy who plays in your top 6 and can put up big points who nobody thought could as he kind of rediscovers his game as a, what is he, like 20, 28?
26, 27?
27,
yeah.
Oh, he's 30.
Oh, geez. I was way off.
Old AF, Justin. Love the Pittsburgh Penguins getting Connor Sheary back and Evan Rodriguez from the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah,
Connor Sheary comes home.
That could be good for Crosby right there.
Penguins haven't won the cup since Connor Sheary left.
It's true.
Dude, they won the Stanley Cup 2 years in a row after calling Connor Sheary up. Connor Sheary leaves, and they get skunked in 2 years in a row, and Connor Sheary's back. Maybe he's all they need.
Yeah, again, it's kind of like Edmonton, right? There's not a lot of guys that can play on the wing with Crosby and do it well. Whereas the same with McDavid, there's not a lot of guys that play on his wing very well either. And so Sherry's been one of those guys that can skate, can play with Crosby, and they fit together pretty good. I think Pittsburgh, I don't know how long he's still going to be out, but Brian Rust, they're still waiting for him to come back so they can throw him on a line with Crosby too. But Jason Zucker, though, has looked pretty good with Crosby, I will say, and we'll talk about that trade a little later.
Yes.
But I think from a Buffalo perspective, right, this is a good move. You get a guy who, still relatively young. He's only 24, so he's still got some time to develop, I think. And, he can be a consistent 30, 40-point guy that maybe you can throw on your second line and give you a little bit more depth on the wing, which is definitely what Buffalo needs right now.
Okay. Let's talk about Nick Cousins going to the Vegas Golden Knights real quick for a 4th-round pick to Montreal. Love this move because of giving up Cody Eakins earlier in the day. Even though Cody Eakins was playing center, he also played the wing, and so they bring in a guy who can. He's actually put up 22 points so far this year, so not a bad point producer for what ends up being a 4th-round pick, and they were able to trade Eakins for a 5th-round pick. So a pretty nice haul there for the Golden Knights. Christian Juice goes from the Capitals to the Ducks in exchange for Daniel Sprong. This one was an interesting one to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Little depth move.
Yeah, it's a little depth move. I think, when the Capitals won the Cup, I remember hearing Christian Juice's name quite a bit during that run. But he's a good depth defenseman, and I think Anaheim, if they're hitting that rebuild, that reset button, I think at 25 he still gives them a guy with some experience who can be maybe in a couple years a veteran guy to a lot of the younger kids like Sam Steele, even though he is on defense, just a nice guy to have in the locker room, I think. Yep.
All right, the Sharks, they make out trading Barclay Goodrow, a fourth line guy, for a 1st-round pick and Anthony Greco. They also give up a 3rd-round pick, which is Philadelphia's in 2020.
Yeah, I actually really like this move from a Tampa Bay perspective. And the big reason why is, what's-his-face, Barclay is still signed, right? He's not just a 1-year guy, and I think that's why it ended up costing them a 1st-round pick, is because he still has some years left on his deal. How many years did he?
He's got 1 year after this year.
That's right, 1 year. Okay, thank you. But I think he's a guy who can come in, give you some bottom 6 minutes. He has a good two-way game. He's a good penalty killer, which I think Tampa Bay will never say no to, because then they can keep their more finesse, talented guys give them a little bit of a breather, keep them off the ice, and then you can go throw your Anthony Cirelli's, your Alex Killorn's out on the penalty kill, and give guys like Stamkos and Braden Point a little breather. But so he'll be a nice depth move for them. And again, for a team that's a little bit up against the cap, with a lot of higher end salaries, he'll be a guy that fits in that bottom 6 real nice at a low cost.
Yeah, I understand giving up your 1st-round pick.
It's essentially a 2nd-round pick.
No, it's not. You know what? That's what people said last year. Oh, it's essentially a 2nd-round pick, and then you know what it ended up being is like 20th overall.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
You don't know what's going to happen. Now, of course, you're taking a risk, and you would, as the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's an appropriate risk to take. I just don't really I think there's other players and other teams that if you had said, "Oh, we'll give you a 1st-round pick for your 3rd-line guy over here," that they would have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I understand he's making 1.6. I know that next year it's very likely that a guy like Tyler Johnson or Andre Palat or Alex Killorn will be dealt, and that leaves for a guy like Goodrow to move up into the lineup. You have some cost control. At
a little under $1 million, I don't mind it for a good, bottom six guy who kills penalties. I think if he goes out and does what he was brought in to do and doesn't try to be anything more, I think it'll be a decent steal for them. That is, again, assuming that Tampa Bay goes a little deep in the playoffs and this ends up being a late first round.
You're telling me that the Detroit Red Wings would have been unwilling to give up Andre Athanasiou for a first-round pick?
No, well, okay. So here's my thought on that, right? Detroit definitely would have given Athanasiou up for a first-round pick. However, the problem is as I'm sure Tampa Bay wisely knows, is that he's an RFA after the season, and he's going to want $3-4 million. So they can't afford to give him that anyway. So
yeah, obviously these teams are doing their homework, but there's just far more that I would want to acquire with my first round pick. It seems to me like even a guy like, I don't know.
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of other guys that, you or I or a lot of other people would have pointed at and been like, okay, for a guy that has term and, low cap it, I would have much rather given up my first round for that guy, right? But
and the fact that they also give up they gave up a first round pick and Nolan Foote for Blake Coleman. That's a better deal. Blake Coleman at least is
he's a goal scorer.
Yeah.
But again, we'll see how this deal pans out, right? I know Tampa Bay did their homework. There's a reason they wanted this guy.
And apparently, the two guys they got, Coleman and Goodrow, they had those two guys pinned for we need to get these guys.
Right. So they know something we don't. That's why they're being paid the money to scout, and we're not. So
hey, speak for yourself. All right, let's move to Sami Vatanen going to the Carolina Hurricanes for Frederick Claesson, Yanni Kokkonen, and a conditional fourth-round pick, which becomes a third-round pick if Vatanen plays in 12 regular season games or Carolina makes the playoffs and he plays in 70% of their playoff games.
Yeah, not bad.
Which I think will likely happen.
Yeah. Gosh, another one that we called here on OT Hockey Talk.
That's right.
Quite proud about that one.
Here.
Yeah, I do like this move because, again, you get a right-handed shot, right? I think with Dougie Hamilton being out, I'm not sure how long he's going to be gone. Brett Pesce's gone too now. They definitely needed to bring in a defenseman. We know they did bring in another defenseman. I'm not sure why they brought in both these guys, but we'll find out.
Because Dougie Hamilton's also hurt.
Well, yeah. But I like Sami Vatanen. He has mobility. He has the ability to move the puck up and down the ice quickly. He can still be a decent point producer. So you get a guy who, when he was in Anaheim, right, he was looked at as a potential really good top four guy. And then being a right-handed shot too, right? Those things are very hard to come by, especially at deadline time. You usually end up paying a little bit more. So I think for what they sent over, even if it is a conditional pick and a couple prospects, I think they did get their money's worth for sure for a guy like Vatanen.
I just don't understand why New Jersey, how did New Jersey not get more for Sami Vatanen when the Montreal Canadiens got a second freaking round pick for Marco Scandella? All they can get, Frederick Claesson, he's a career AHL. That's really all he is. Maybe a bottom pairing guy if things pan out. Sami Vatanen though is he's a 40-point defenseman in the right system, and when he can stay healthy, he's a 40-point defenseman. And Yanni Kokkonen, he was taken in the second round. He's actually having a pretty nice season in the American Hockey League right now. He's got 42 points in 52 games. He's never produced. He doesn't have a point in the NHL yet. Obviously, they're hoping that he can be a player for them. But, to acquire what they acquired for Sami Vatanen seems like you should have been able to... if the Lightning are giving up a first-round pick for Goodrow, how are you not at least getting something more than...
Right, defensemen are more valuable. Let's face it, especially a right-handed guy. My thought process, I had two thoughts on that.
Brady Shea goes for a first-round pick. I know that Vatanen's a free agent at the end of this year.
That does come into play. But my thought process is, one, Sammy Vatanen's never played a full 82 games. So you don't know what kind of guy you're going to get in terms of health. So you might get a guy that, and again, maybe he plays the rest of the year. So how are those
conditions not, like, it's a conditional 4th-round pick?
Yeah, and I think, too,
probably a third.
It'll probably be a third. But you look at, and I think, given where Carolina is, I think they probably expect this guy to walk at the end of the year. They're probably not going to re-sign him. So maybe they weren't willing to give, but I think where the trade ended up being at the end of the day, right? I think New Jersey maybe was steadfast in saying, hey, we want a first-round pick. Maybe nobody was willing to give it to him for a guy who has never been healthy for a full season. And then finally they had to take the scraps because everybody was backing out. All the defensemen were gone. Picks were moved, and they're like, crap, we got to take what we can get. So they get some decent prospects, guys who could be, decent players, not top 6 guys, but, could be potential, NHLers. And then you still get a 3rd-round pick. So they get something.
All right. Robin Lehner goes to the Vegas Golden Knights essentially for Malcolm Subban and a 2nd-round pick.
Love this deal.
Yeah.
Love it.
Beautiful deal for them.
Yeah.
I think this deal in and of itself guarantees the Vegas Golden Knights make the playoffs.
Yeah. More importantly, it's you keep Marc-Andre Fleury fresh for the playoffs more than anything else. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still think Vegas is going to win this division.
They've won 8 in a row now. So
they've been on fire.
They're 6 points up on Vancouver and Edmonton. I don't think they'll be relinquishing that division lead
Not at all.
No.
I hope Stone gets back soon. He was out there last game. I'm not sure what his status is. But, again, all things aside, Robin Lehner is going to be a quality goaltender that's going to give them good starts when he's in there. You're essentially putting in another number 1. It's like having Tuukka Rask and Halak in net. Like Boston, they're not worried about who's playing minutes for them in net. So same with Vegas, right? They never really had a lot of faith, a lot of confidence in their backup position, and Lehner solidifies that for them for the stretch down here. And obviously Vegas isn't going to re-sign him. They don't have the cap money to do it, and I think Lehner could potentially end up back in Chicago, but. Like I said, he gives Marc-Andre Fleury some rest down the stretch.
Yep, and that's exactly. And plus, at the same time, he also gives. And by the way, Mark Stone not on IR or anything, so he'll be fine. Also gives him an option in the playoffs. I mean, Fleury has gone down before, and also Fleury has had some weird playoffs. Like, he's been great the last 4 years. But it just gives you options. I think that having those options and having the competition behind you is never a bad thing. And Fleury has proven that he can handle having somebody else who's very talented behind him, and he'll be okay with whatever happens.
Right. And he knows, too, that this isn't a long-term thing either. He knows that they're going to go find somebody else to play backup at the end of this season. So,
I mean, Robin Leonard's got to be able to find a starting job somewhere.
Oh, somebody will pay him money. I mean, like I said, he can go back to Chicago, and they'll probably offer him a long-term deal, too.
It's true. Okay, last big move of the day. Brady Shea goes to the Carolina Hurricanes for a conditional first-round pick. The condition being that the Hurricanes have their own and Toronto's first-round pick. Whichever one is lower, the later pick is the one that the Rangers will get. So,
right.
This one kind of came out of nowhere to me. Wasn't necessarily expecting them to move a guy like Brady Shea, but they ditch on their veteran defenseman.
Yeah, I love this move actually from a New York Rangers standpoint, and I'll tell you why. Basically, there's 2 names when you look at the Rangers defense, right? Obviously, we know about Trouba. He's got the long-term deal in there too. We know about another veteran guy, Mark Stahl, but 2 guys, Anthony DeAngelo and Adam Fox, to me, are the reason why Brady Shea was expendable and able to net them a first-round pick and a draft where they're probably going to get a pretty good prospect. DeAngelo's come out of nowhere through 62 games, 47 points. Last year, 30 points in 60 games.
And they know they're going to have to sign him to probably a pretty good deal.
Yeah, they got a couple years, so they're going to see what he's going to turn out to really be.
Oh, and no, DeAngelo's a free agent at the end of this year.
He's
an RFA at the end of the year. So,
yes.
I mean, he's coming to the end of his ELC. I mean, based on what he had 30 points last year, and he's got 47 this year through the same amount of games.
So he's probably going to want $5-6 million at least.
Yeah, it's
you know,
likely
for a short-term deal.
Either you sign him to a shortened deal, you know, a little bridge deal, or he gets maybe 6 years at $5 million apiece.
Right. And then, of course, Adam Fox, the Harvard guy, you know, comes in this season, and he's looked great back there. I mean, 35 points through 64 games. Now, you do have a little bit, you know, more wiggle room with him because he's got a couple more years left on his deal. But I think longer term, they look at it and say, okay, well, you know, if we got these two guys producing at such a consistent rate for us, we know we're going to have to obviously give Adam Fox some money, and we like his game a little bit better than Brady Shea's, you know, at least from an offensive standpoint. And so, you know, they're going to have to pay him again that Anthony D'Angelo money, same thing too, and you know, made Brady Shea a little bit more expendable for a guy who's kind of, I don't want to say struggled this year, but hasn't looked as good as he, you know, was when he signed with them.
Yeah. So now let's go back down the old trade deadline history. Remember, well, it wasn't trade deadline. It was last year, April 30th was when the Hurricanes traded Adam Fox to the New York Rangers. So if we break down both these trades, we've got Carolina sending Adam Fox to the New York Rangers, along with a first-round draft pick that can in 2020 for what has now become a second-round pick, Brady Shea, and Mads Sogard, who is who they took in the second round here. So,
okay,
pretty good haul for Carolina.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, this is the guy.
I mean, they traded Adam Fox in the first-round pick. And they've got Brady Shea. They've got a guy who was drafted in the second round last year. So I'm sure that they have high hopes for him, and another second round pick this year.
Yeah, and let's not forget too, Adam Fox. He didn't want to go play in Carolina, right? So they weren't going to get any production out of him regardless. So they had to move him.
Right.
I mean, it's no surprise, anyways. You look at Carolina at the time too; their depth at defense, they were stacked, and again, still are, but. Yeah, so, you know, Fox goes over there, and then they get quite a decent return for a guy like that.
Yeah. All right, well, that's the trade deadline. Before we sign off, anyone that's in the playoffs right now that you think will miss the playoffs?
Yeah, Calgary. I really think
Calgary.
Calgary could be one team that I look at to potentially struggle. To me, they don't look like they have the drive like some of these other teams do, and maybe it's because, you know, again, they've kind of sat in a wild card spot for most of the season. But you look at that game the other night against Nashville, right, where they lost with, I mean, Nashville ties it up with 0.1 seconds and then wins in overtime. Yeah. Michael Granlund killing them. But they don't seem to be clicking on all cylinders. They don't seem to be playing as well as they should be. And so, you know, if their goaltending doesn't carry them a little bit more, if Gaudreau doesn't really step up, I think even more, they could be sitting on the outside with teams like, you know, Nashville, Winnipeg, and even Minnesota really pushing.
I'll say the Columbus Blue Jackets probably end up missing the playoffs.
Okay, they've been hot though.
They actually are 1-4-5 in their last 10, so they have been very bad.
Have they really?
Yeah, they were hot before those 10 games. They were hot. That's okay. It's no offense to Columbus fans. It's easy to forget about them.
No, that's true.
But you would think that based on what Carolina did at the deadline, bringing in Brady Shea, Sammy Vatanen, and Vince Trocheck, while giving up very little to their roster, you would think that this team has what it takes to overcome the Columbus Blue Jackets. When you consider that they have 3 games in hand on Columbus, they're only 2 points back. I have to think that the Carolina Hurricanes can figure this out and overcome the Blue Jackets, where I think that, yes, the Blue Jackets went on a nice little run, but I just don't think that it was enough. Like, they just aren't good enough.
No, I agree.
They went on a run when they were so far out of the playoffs, and now they're in the playoffs, and the pressure's on again, and now they're struggling.
Yeah, I think, too, when you look at that Metro, there's a lot of other teams, like we talked about at Carolina. I think you even have the Rangers pushing pretty hard, and then, of course, you've got Florida still. I don't know if they're going to get bitten by getting rid of Trocheck or if Bobrovsky's going to...
Well, I mean, Florida now is... they're 4 points back of the Leafs. They do have a game in hand in terms of the wild card.
Right.
I think they're probably...
But they're right there, too. So,
I think right now it's like a 40% chance they make the playoffs, or 38% or something like that. That game against the Leafs was like where they started. Whoever won, if one of the teams won in regulation,
that was a 4-point game.
I think the Leafs went from a 60% chance of making the playoffs to like a 76%, and Carolina went from a 52 to a 38% or something like that with
Florida?
that one game. Yeah, Florida. Yeah,
right.
Sorry. Also, mark this on your calendar, because this could be a very huge game. April 3rd, the second to last game of the year for the Carolina Hurricanes. They do play the Columbus Blue Jackets.
That'll be a good one.
That should be a massive game. But yeah, it'll be. I'm curious to see if the Rangers can find their way in here. I don't think that the Islanders, despite some struggling as of late, I don't think that they'll miss. I think they'll figure this out. This isn't the worst time to struggle, like to have a little bit of a slow time. And then with 15 games left towards the playoffs, that's when you can really start picking it up.
Yeah, better now than with 4 games left.
Right, yeah. Exactly. All right, well, that's our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and we will be back next week to, we'll be back this week. We're recording this on a Saturday, so you'll hear this. You're probably hearing this on Monday, but we'll have more content for you. No more vacations for a little while, so that'll be good. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon.